Now we'll go through the process of adding a carrier into the program. Here we have the carrier detail form in our setup wizard, so go ahead and click Next to get started. First thing TPS does is automatically assign a number for the carrier. Click Next. Here we can enter the carrier name. Let's go ahead and start with Medicare Part B. You want to make sure that if you have multiple Medicares to enter into the program that you make some sort of distinction between each one, as it can get confusing when you pull up your list and they all say Medicare Part B or State Farm or Aetna. Sometimes it's helpful to put the name of the city after the carrier to determine which one you're dealing with. Click Next. Here we have address line 1 and 2 if necessary. Go ahead and insert the address for this carrier. Click Next. Here we enter the city, state, and zip. Next, the phone number for the insurance carrier. Next, a fax number if you have one from the company. Next, here we have information for a contact with the insurance company. So if you talk to one person on a regular basis or correspond with one person on a regular basis, you can put their name in here. Otherwise, you can just leave it blank. Click Next. Here we have the carrier type. TPS gives you the ability to categorize your carriers by type, typically for financial purposes, so you can group all your Medicares, all your personal injuries, all your Blue Crosses, etc. together, so that when you run certain reports within the program, those carriers will fall under that carrier type. Go ahead and click the drop down to see the list, and as you can see, a bunch come with the program already, and you can always add more if you need to. Here we can see Medicare type, so I'll go ahead and select that one for now. Click Next. Here we have the claim form that is automatically generated when you create bills for this carrier. Depending on whether you're billing electronic or paper billing, you'll want to select the most appropriate billing form for this particular carrier, the one that will be used most often. Note that if you ever need to switch the billing form for whatever reason, you can do so manually after creating your bill batch. Clicking your drop down, you can see a list of all the bill types that you can select. If I scroll up, I can see the CMS 1500 General 0805. It's a very common report type, especially if you're doing paper billing, so I'll go ahead and choose that one for now. Click Next. Alright, so in TPS you have the ability to automatically generate messages depending on certain scenarios. In this scenario, we have the re-exam days. Certain insurance carriers require that a patient have an exam done every so often, depending on their policy. Let's say this carrier wants an exam done every 90 days. I could put a 90 in here, and after a patient receives their exam, and then another 90 days passes, a message will automatically generate within the system and attach itself to the patient's claim, which can then be viewed on the appointment for when that patient next comes in. Clicking Next. Over here we have a checkbox that says Print, Soap, and Documenter. This relates to a feature in Documenter which allows you to create SOAP notes based on this particular carrier. Click Next. Here we are back at the message notifications. In this instance we have re-X-ray days, similar to re-exam days. If you put a figure in here, such as 30 days, a message will appear after 30 days letting you know that it's time to do a new X-ray for the insurance purposes. Go ahead and click Next. Again, like the re-exam and re-X-ray days, we have the report days. If a report needs to be generated a certain time in between visits, you can put that amount of time here. Next. Here's where you put the title of that report, should the insurance company require one. Click Next. If instead of every so many days a report needs to be on a certain visit number, you can put that visit number here, such as visit number 15. Now, on the 15th visit for patients who have this carrier, a message will generate letting you know a report needs to be run. Clicking Next, we can see the report title for this specific notification. Click Next. Here we have the finance charge annual percentage rate, the minimum amount, and the number of days an insurance balance is outstanding before a finance charge is incurred. Basically what this is for is if you're lucky enough to be able to levy finance charges against an insurance company for outstanding charges, you can go ahead and set that information up here with a percentage rate, a flat rate, and the amount of days the charge has to be overdue before the finance charge will get applied. Click Next. Here we have the e-billing information section. You can see there's a little box here that's going to contain all of your e-billing information. We're going to scroll through this for now because this will be covered in a later video. This is the last field in the e-billing information box right here. And again, this has to do with the 837 healthcare, professional, and institutional billing format. If you are going to be billing out in one of these formats, you can go ahead and watch the videos that pertain to that particular billing protocol. Go ahead and click Next. Now we don't have any policies set up for this carrier yet, so it's going to ask if we want to create one right now. In TPS, the policy records specifically what the carrier is going to be paying versus what the patient is going to be paying. It also allows you to make changes to certain CPT codes, so if you need certain modifiers for a carrier, you can make those here. Let's go ahead and get started by creating a policy by clicking Yes. And then once again, we'll click Yes to add the new policy. And here we have a basic policy. You may have several patients who have Medicare in your office, but they may not all have the same policies. Because of that, you can create multiple policies under a single carrier within TPS, saving you time from entering the same carrier over and over again. Here you can see that the carrier's name in regards to this policy is up here, as well as the address. And here we can enter a name for this policy. It's advised that you name this as distinct as possible in regards to this particular policy. We're only going to add in one Medicare Part B policy, so I'm just going to name it Medicare Part B. And I'll go ahead and leave it at that. Below that we have the default service percent and the default policy inventory carrier percent. These two percentages are the default percentages that will be applied to all the services and inventory items within the program that the carrier will pay. So if your carrier was going to pay 100% of everything, you're going to go ahead and put 100% in the services and in the inventory if they were paying for inventory. For Medicare, they're only going to pay a certain percentage of their allowable amount on the office visits, specifically these CMT 1 to 2 regions and the CMT 3 to 4 regions. So we're going to put in 0 here, and it'll ask you if I want to apply this to all service items, and I'll click Yes. And I'll put a 0 here. And again, ask me if I want to change all inventory items, and I'll click Yes. We're going to change these two to reflect what Medicare will pay, however, versus what the patient has to pay. So let's say you have a price of $15 for your 1 to 2 regions, but Medicare says you can only charge $10. Immediately, as I put in $10 under the allowable amount, you'll notice that a purple line appears for this particular service line. This implies that an exception has been made that is different from the typical entry for this service within its master list. Now they're going to pay 80% on the $10, so we can change this 0 to an 80. And then watch as the carrier pays and patient pays automatically adjusts itself to reflect 80% of $10 and then the patient paying the remainder. We can see here that $5 is adjusted off of the total price that you guys charge so that you can keep track of it for your accounts receivable. Similarly, we can do the same thing to the 3 to 4 regions, but Medicare will only allow you to charge $37.50. Once again, the exception turns the line purple. Make this 0 and 80%, and it will do 80% of the allowable amount, leaving you with $30 and $7.50 respectively for the carrier and the patient, adjusting off everything else that does not get paid. Now, to cover a few other aspects within the carrier policy screen, if we go over here to the top left, we see the day limit checkbox that will put a cap on the amount that can be charged to a claim in any given day. Here we have the item name / description, the CPT code. Over here we have the source location and source type. If this service needs something different for these pieces of information for this carrier, you can make the adjustments here. Source type needed to be D, and location needed to be 12. I can make this exception here, and anybody with this policy will report this information instead of the original information stored within the service's master list. Same thing goes for the CPT code. If I need a G modifier, I can put that G right here, and every time I deliver that service, it will get billed out with the G and the CPT code. Here we have the deductible checkbox, which will say whether or not the service can be applied to the deductible. If taxes are not applicable, we can click the tax button here. Applicable taxes can also be determined for carriers and patients specifically on each tax entered within the program. If you need to clear your exceptions, you can press this Clear Exceptions button, and it'll ask if you want to clear all exceptions for inventory and service items based on your default percentages. Note this will clear all exceptions for all services and all inventory items. It does not clear specific individual services or inventory items. Go ahead and click No for now because we want to keep these changes. And we're done with this policy, so we'll go ahead and click Next. It brings us back to our carrier detail form, and a new button appears in the bottom right called Carrier Provider Numbers. This section again has to do with the e-billing information for the 837 professional and institutional, and will be gone over in a different video. Click Next. And that's it for setting up your carriers. It'll ask you if you wish to add another item, and we'll go ahead and set up another one real quick. Click Yes. Click Yes again. Let's get started again by clicking Next. A new number is assigned, and this time let's enter a State Farm carrier. Click Next. Enter in your address information. Next again for the city, state, and zip. The phone number. We'll skip over the fax number. We don't have contact information because every time we call it's somebody different, so we'll leave this alone. Carrier type, this time we'll go ahead and say it's a typical group. Click Next. We're still doing our paper billing, so we'll put this as the CMS 1500 General. Click Next. They don't need a re-exam. And as far as x-rays go, they want one 180 days. No reports necessary. And we're not going to charge them any finance charges. This is still paper billing, so we'll leave this alone as well. And we're going to create a new policy for this carrier. So we'll click Yes, and Yes again. And this time we're going to set up an 80-20 policy where the carrier pays a default of 80% on services and inventory items so that the patient can pick up 20%. So I'm going to call this State Farm and then put 80-20. Here I'll put 80%. And then I'll select Yes because I want to apply it to all services. And select Yes. And here, as you can see, in the carrier percentage column, all the way down, is marked with 80%, meaning that the carrier is going to pay 80% of the price here or in the allowable amount if I were to put a specific price in there instead. And the patient will pick up the 20%. So in the case of something simple like a $10 charge, 80% would be $8 as the carrier is going to pay, and the patient will pay $2. This one's pretty simple and doesn't need any extra tweaking, so we're going to go ahead and click Next to complete it. And then click Next so we can finish out that carrier. Let's go ahead and add one more for the example. So we'll click Yes, and Yes to add a new carrier. This time we're going to add in Aetna. Click Next. Address. Click Next. The city. Their phone number. This time we do have a fax number, so we're going to go ahead and put that in. Click Next. Contact is Joe Smith. Carrier type. I'm going to go ahead and put this as a personal injury type. Claim form is still paper. And they don't require any re-exams, re-x-rays, etc., etc. Can't give them any finance charges. And it's paper, so we don't need to do any electronic billing. Here it asks us again if we want to create a policy, so we'll go ahead and hit Yes. And Yes again. Now this is going to be a 100% policy with a certain exception to a particular category. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the name first, Aetna 100%, except then I'm going to put X-ray 80, indicating that they only pay 80% on X-rays. But because almost everything else is going to be 100%, I'm going to put 100 in the default categories. Click Yes to apply. Click Yes to apply. Now to make a certain exception for a particular category, we can go over to this tab over here. Make the screen a little bigger. There we go. And we can see that we have a list of all of our inventory and service categories, whether it's an inventory or a service item, and then the category name over here. Currently, we made a 100% default percentage rate, so they're all at 100. But if they're not going to pay anything more than 80% on X-rays, we can go ahead and change that here to 80%. And we'll hit yes to apply it to all X-ray category services. Once you're done, we can go over to our X-ray and see that the carrier percentage is 80% only for the X-rays, and that everything else is 100. Note that setting up some of these policies can take quite a bit of time, especially if certain carriers have a bunch of policies. But it will save you time in the long run when you don't have to make adjustments every time you add a service in for your Medicare patient because they only pay a certain amount. Doing a little bit of groundwork now will certainly pay off in the end. And when the insurance companies inevitably change something about their fee schedules or their allowable amounts or the percentage they pay, you can come back in here and make the adjustments as necessary. Nothing here is locked in stone by any means. This concludes the tutorial on walking through how to set up your carriers and the policies associated with those carriers. Let's go ahead and move on to the next video.